We're back.
We're back again.
Today we talk about Chapter 6 from the 33 Strategies of War by
Yes.
Robert Greene. Chapter 6, Segment Your Forces, the Controlled Chaos Strategy. Now, for those who are avid Robert Greene fans and readers, they'll know that Law 23 from the 48 Laws of Power was to concentrate your forces. So in the 48 Laws of Power, he's saying concentrate your forces, and in the 33 Strategies of War, he's saying segment your forces. Why do you think? Why do you think he's doing that?
Well, I think that there's also either a law or a strategy that he says stay in tune with the times, right?
Yeah,
So they seem to contradict each other, but what he's also saying is, look, you need to read the field of battle,
the current
right?
situation.
The current situation, whether you are actually in a battle or whether you are, a surgeon or an engineer or an architect, stay in touch, stay in the present, and then determine, what it is that you're going to do in that particular instance. Are you going to concentrate your forces in this particular area, or are you going to scatter them like Napoleon did? So
That's a really good point.
yeah, so I think that if we keep that in mind, we can see that they don't necessarily cancel each other out. They
They
may
don't-
complement each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so-
they don't contradict each other. It's what tool do you use at that time?
Correct.
Because he makes great arguments for both of them. I mean, to me, what I got out of chapter 6 is that the lighter you are, the quicker you can maneuver and adapt and change in a
Correct.
situation. The larger you are and heavier, larger team, larger army, larger amount of employees, company, it takes longer to make a change. And we've talked about Blockbuster. They weren't able to make a change fast enough, and a Netflix that was light on their toes came in and destroyed them.
That's right.
So, I mean, look at an Amazon, how they've been able to adapt, and a Google, they've been able to adapt. They have like these companies that they've, YouTube and Google and all these different segments of their massive company, right? Anyways,
Oh, it's got to be mind-boggling.
yeah,
And you have to have, in an organization with thousands of employees, you have to have, you have to scatter your forces. You have to have
You have to
upper
segment.
management. Yeah, you have to segment. You have to have upper management. And we worked for a Fortune 500 company that was an excellent company. And as time went by, I feel my 2 cents is that it deteriorated. There were too many meetings that were unnecessary. You got upper management, middle management, and then lower management. And sometimes I felt that meetings were being thrown out there just to substantiate the fact that they had employment, but the content for the meetings were not there. There was a total waste of time. And so when you see that happening, it's the beginning of the end for the company, or the company is already in big trouble.
Your last chapter goes into what you were saying, the command and control strategy, that there's too many, there's not a clear chain of command. There's too many layers between. It kind of goes hand in hand with this chapter 6, which is segment your forces. Because if you have too many layers in between, too much corporate managers, you end up, is that you?
I believe that's you.
No, that's not me. It's one of us. If you have too many layers in between, like you're talking about,
It's not me.
The company ends up, you lose that communication. You're not swift at moving. You're not light, and we experienced that with this company, that they had too many layers.
Yeah, and Unfortunately, the morale of the agency force, this was an insurance company,
Yeah.
the morale of the agency force diminished. And the reason I'm saying that is because I lived it and I was one of them. And it became difficult to get back in line, let's say. When you're creating and you have a clear path and you're, again, creating and doing something productive, everybody aligns into that vision. But when there's lack of leadership in that sense, then the forces, it's just like what we were talking about. If your commands are not clear and concise and they're vague, by the time they reach the field, they're useless.
Yeah.
And it was the same here. We lived it. We lived it.
Yeah.
And so the company is still thriving, is still doing good, and there's new agents in there.
Well, they cleaned house also.
They cleaned house.
They got rid of a lot of management, a lot of people.
Yeah.
They started cutting costs, so.
And a lot of the older agents left. You're looking at one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, there's something to be said about when there's so much change. The people that have been there, I don't know if they're reluctant to the change or resist the change, but it's difficult because you've got a taste of what it was in the past. And now these are new times moving forward. So I kept hearing a lot before I left the company. It's a young man's or young woman's game now. It's a young man or young woman's game. And I kept hearing that. And I know that these folks came in with different set of skills than the older guys and the older ladies had. But they're still making it work.
Right.
So, it's an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah. You
I
needed
think
new blood.
You needed new blood to continue, I guess, yeah.
One of the things that was fascinating was the way he explained Genghis Khan, his strategy in going into war.
Yeah.
And it was controlled chaos. That's what it seemed to the opponent. Because, and he even, Greene says that the opponent would say that the Mongols were possessed.
By the devil.
Yeah. Yeah, that it seemed that they were possessed because of the way that they attacked, and it just was from all angles, I guess. But that was done by training. That was intentional.
Correct.
They were extremely efficient in their way of fighting, and the opponent didn't know how to protect themselves because I guess traditional warfare was you would line up to attack the other army. It was like almost order, and then these guys are coming in. Napoleon's coming in, and they're disrupting that.
Correct. So, in the beginning of the chapter, he talks about speed and adaptability, and he makes it. Robert Greene stays on that for a little while. He says, "Look, speed and adaptability is critical elements in the war." Okay, and again, the war. Back then, he's talking about Napoleon and the way they used to fight on the fields. Everything changes, but you can pick any niche or any
business,
hospital,
organization,
and your home, your family life. Okay, it's not necessarily a war, but it's definitely speed and adaptability. He says, look, mobility is the greatest force multiplier in the war.
Yeah.
So mobility is the greatest force multiplier in any field. Okay? And I can give you a quick example. We bought this commercial building last year. Somebody told us, like, at 8 in the morning. We looked at it at 9:30. We made an offer. And by the next day, we were in escrow. Yes?
Next day or two, yeah. It was within a very short period.
As soon as we were in escrow, all kinds of people started coming out of the woodwork, right?
They were interested also in the property.
Yeah.
Because this was never put on the market.
Right. But we
moved quick.
So we were mobility. We had the speed and adaptability to be able to do that, and we think we got a good deal.
That's a really
The
good
seller got a
point.
good deal too, because of the way that the sale was structured.
It
So it was
worked
a
out.
win-win for everybody.
But it's a really good point because we have another property that is a unique one. It's a commercial property. It's a 32,000 square foot lot. It's got a lot of things, right? And I've reached out to different organizations, from cities to schools, districts, to a lot of different organizations, and they move very slowly. So the person that moves quickly, like us in this instance, I mean, you call us the same day we're at the property, same day we're making an offer, negotiations, and then we're opening escrow a day or two later. That speed is what gets the job done. And if you don't move quickly like that, you're going to lose to the guy who moves quickly if it's a good opportunity, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure. You got to pull the trigger. Nowadays, there's so much competition in every field.
And
I don't care what you're talking about. Computers,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everything.
An opportunity waits for no one.
Right.
And that's one thing that the mobility of Napoleon's forces, because they were segmented into smaller, what he called corps. These corps were able to, they had a mini Napoleon there, somebody who was like an extension of him, goes into the previous chapter to create a, what was the word that Eisenhower, Marshall with Eisenhower?
Oh,
he was
protege.
a protege. So you would have Napoleon's, let's call him protege, who was able to make decisions without having to reach back out to let's say Napoleon for every single move. That was unique. And that means you have to lose control, some of the control, by not being as involved in every single decision. But Greene is arguing that losing control, you gain, even though you're losing control, you lose something there. You're gaining much more by having that mobility.
Yeah, you're delegating to a certain extent.
You're delegating and to
And
the right
it's,
people.
it's the most difficult thing that you can do. Delegating is very difficult. Because if you're the idea, and I've mentioned before, initially when I opened my business, you're reading all these books and you're following all these people that have been there before you, and they're like your mentors, and you're seeing what they're doing. And the answer, I believe, is you take a little bit from here, a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and you adapt it to your way and see if your way works.
Yeah.
And whatever section of it doesn't work, you cut it out and you bring something else in. It's just a constant learning. But yeah, delegating is the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. And in the beginning, I always thought, well, look, nobody's going to do this job as good as I'm going to do it, But then you need help, especially if you want to grow your business, scale it. You can't continue to do everything, or you won't have a life.
Another point to that is knowing what to delegate and what to still do yourselves. You still handle certain things yourself, even though you have employees. That those are things that you're not willing to relinquish, let's say.
Right.
Because you feel you're the best person to handle that. Now, maybe somebody else would say, well, you should hand that off too. But you've chosen to keep that. Right? So how do you know what to delegate and what to continue to do yourself?
It depends on the direction and the growth of your company. For example, in this case, I'm thinking of my insurance agency. So, it depends. If you want to grow it by leaps and bounds, then you have to develop producers, and you have to have a branch for new business. And so that takes you in that direction. If you want to not sit back, but concentrate on your renewals, then you have to develop your customer service department to the perfection and make sure that every client gets attended to on the very same date that they call, which with whatever issues that they may have, whatever problem may have arisen, something with the mortgage payment, the bank didn't get the copy, whatever the case, God forbid, a car accident, blah, blah, blah. So it depends on the direction of your company. But I'm here to tell you, you can't be an absentee, 100% absentee, and expect it to work well for a long time. You have to be there to manage the numbers.
Yeah.
The numbers are very important.
Right.
The numbers give you everything.
Yeah.
So you can't just take your, and we had that example of our friend, the contractor, that
Oh yeah. Yeah.
quickly, this gentleman had a contracting company. He was a general contractor, and it was doing very, very well for many, many years. He had a tremendous reputation. He ended up going to Mexico,
Right.
and only coming back to California like twice a month or something like that. And
It cost him his business.
it cost him his business because his foreman underbid the work, and he wasn't there to check those numbers. He had to give up the location he was in. He's working out of his garage with 1/3 of the crew. I mean, so you can't just let it all go. You gotta keep an eye on it and tweak it.
Yeah, but the idea of what Napoleon was doing here, where let's say delegating into smaller segments, they still have a unity of a vision and a mission. And
Yes.
it was cool how Greene talked about this idea. It was called that the Germans used.
Oh yeah.
It was called Auftrag.
Mm-hmm.
Auftrag,
Yeah.
which is a German word, which it's a statement of the overall mission, and you're giving leeway to the, let's say, the people that are going to follow that mission to not follow it to the T, to the letter. They have the ability to make decisions and adapt. That's, I think, very, very important. You're empowering the people within, but you have an overarching mission. So
Yeah, so he talked about two forms of commands that the Germans had. One of them was called Bufeo, and Bufeo was a command that was going to have to be followed to the letter of the law and in detail. There was no room for interpretation there. And then the second command was that Auftrag, where the leader of that division could take upon himself some interpretation based on, again, what's happening. Stay in tune with the focus of what's currently happening. And I think that's brilliant. Because, if the command came from above and they said, this is a Bufeo command, excuse me, you could not change it. You had to follow it to the letter. But if the command came from above and it was in the form of this Auftrag, then they knew that they had some capability to get creative.
very interesting.
And they destroyed their enemies during that time by implementing this type of commands. And it's brilliant. I mean, who would think of something like that? And it's up to Greene to bring it. I've read this book twice. And now is when I'm, I read this before, but now is when it's making a very, very big impact in me. So it's amazing,
Yeah.
It only took 66 years.
One of the quotes from the book that I thought was very powerful. Victory will forge stronger bonds than superficial friendliness. And victory comes from discipline, training, and ruthlessly high standards. I thought of my times when I was playing high school soccer, football in Europe, and there was nothing like a victory for the team. You're working so hard, you're training, the discipline, you have high standards from the coach, and then you are victorious in a game. The bond, he's saying it will forge stronger bonds. I mean, to this day, I'm very close friends with some of my friends that were on my team.
Super cool.
And it's because I think that you're working on a mission together like that, and then you're victorious. And so Greene is even saying, put your people in circumstances, I guess battles of some sort, so that they can get that feel of being victorious. Because there's nothing like the bonds that are formed when you are victorious. I thought that was a really interesting point.
I totally agree with you. And again, I'm on Instagram or social media way too much for my own good, right? And you see it where buddies that fought in the war,
Yeah.
but they haven't seen each other in 20 years or something, and they do this thing where they film the guy coming up to the door and knocking, and the person opens up and they see each other. They're like brothers.
Yeah.
They hug each other, and it doesn't matter what color you are, what nationality you are, what race, what this, that. They're brothers.
Yeah.
They fought together. They formed that bond, and they came out together. They were able to survive, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, whatever it was, and you see that bond. I mean, it's an amazing thing to see. It's very fulfilling to see it, those clips.
Yeah.
And there's a few out there, and you're right. You're right. It's absolutely fantastic, the bonds that are made. But getting back to Genghis Khan,
Mm-hmm.
they thought that it was absolute chaos, right? Robert Greene says that Genghis Khan had produced a master of mobility. He was a master of mobility, and he would segment his forces. And they didn't know, the enemy didn't know where they were coming from. But Robert Greene says that this was the product of rigorous training. And he cites that Genghis Khan did something called the Great Hunt every year. And this was done during the time of peace, I guess during the winter months maybe. And it was like a span of 180 miles. And he put his forces to hunt the animals that were on the plains and encircle them at the end of whatever length was, like 100 miles or something like that. And it was very rigorous, and it was tremendous training. And that's how his people stayed up, let's say, in form, right, with what they had to do when they actually got into war.
So he would line them up, all the forces, I guess 80 miles, something like that, 180. And then the edges of the forces would begin to curl in, right?
Yeah, narrow in.
Circle.
Right.
And they were hunting animals.
Right.
And so they were doing that until they were trapping these animals.
Correct.
Hunting them, keeping them, I guess, sharp and their...
Yeah, and they said that the bigger animals and dangerous animals would be left to the end, like tigers. So they had to be on their toes too, because you're hunting a tiger, the tiger is gonna fight back. So I'm sure that there were casualties along the way, but that kept them sharp. And it was, Greene says, hey, this was the result of rigorous training. This was literally controlled chaos.
Yeah.
And he's talking about segmenting your forces, and there's a lot to be said about that.
The other thing he's saying is in that it was training / play.
Right.
Because it was fun, I guess, for the Mongols. It was a form of
game.
So they enjoyed it, but your life is also on the line because you're going up against wild animals.
Yeah. And then, you use these skills that you develop in this game to really fight, in
real life.
Real wars.
Yeah.
It's tremendous.
Very interesting. Another point I thought was interesting was to reward your team for doing something right, not just to be liked. And Greene brought up the examples of the Yankees versus the Red Sox.
Yes.
And how was it the manager or the coach? I'm not sure. The owner of these teams was very, very different. The Yankees were disciplined and based on merit, right? And they were rewarded if they made it to the World Series. Then they were getting the Cadillacs. If they made it to this, they were getting the Red Sox. I'm sorry.
The Red Sox. Yeah.
The Red Sox were the owner wanted to be liked by the team, and so he was giving them all kinds of nice hotels and nice perks, but they didn't have to work for it. It wasn't like for a reward. And I remember many times when I was doing training and people were referring me business in the financial services, and I would really try to make it a point that if they referred me a business and I wrote that business, I would try and reward them, so that there was like a correlation of, hey, when I send business to Mike, a referral to Mike, and he closes that deal, I'm going to be, there's some sort of little reward, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And people correlate that, as opposed to just rewarding the office without merit. I remember being frustrated with some agents that I would work with that would just bring Starbucks for the whole staff just because they wanted to be liked. But it wasn't because they had a good week or a good sales day. It was just, let me treat my staff. So you're making a connection.
I've done both.
Okay. How's that worked for you?
I believe that it's better to reward your staff when they reach a goal. Because again, I think that creates that camaraderie that they all work together, And there's a lot of politics involved because you have a common goal for, let's say, the agency, okay? But you got one person that brings in 10 pieces of business, the other one brings in 2 pieces of business, another one brings in 3. We make the goal, everybody shares in the fruits of their labor, but there was one person that brought in a lot.
90%.
90%.
They should be rewarded more heavily than the one who brought 3%.
So you start seeing that. And then if you're not careful, when you set your next goal, then here we go again. This person brings in 12, policies. This one brings 1 and this one's bring 3. And then you don't see a change in that maneuver. So they're relying, these two, on the person that always is kicking. You're right? The ball forward. So you need to be careful and adapt it, and that's how you stay in tune. But I've done both. I've given customers Starbucks cards, or I know in the beginning
employees, you mean?
No, customers that referred business.
Oh, customers. Okay.
Yeah, like you did.
I was doing it to employees, agencies.
Right. Because you had a different position.
They weren't customers, but.
Yeah, I would tell customers, if you send me a client and we write up the policy, no strings attached in any way or form, all we want to do is benefit the client. I'll give you,
thank you
a $20 Starbucks card or 10 or whatever. I used to give out turkeys, but that was a lot of hard work because I was doing that with a couple of people.
So that's different. I'm talking about leading a team.
I've given out hams from that place in Pasadena that has very famous hams. You give out.
But I'm talking about a team. I'm talking about a team because you're giving the customers.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah.
But but it could apply.
No, but for the team, I've done everything. You give a Friday off. They would fight so hard to make the goal because they would get a Friday off.
Yeah, but if everybody got the Friday off, even though
No, it was the person that brought in the most. Because later on you had to differentiate because everybody's leaning on one person to meet the common goals for the office.
That's not good.
That's not good, So there's a lot of politics that go into it. You have and what's the answer? The answer is try it. Put it out there and then tweak it.
You have to tweak it, yeah.
Yeah, you can't be afraid of it because nothing is perfect in life, Even when you think you got it down. Yeah. They're still, but yeah.
I was working with an agency organization that, their top producer, they would send him on a trip.
There you go.
To Germany, to Europe, to here, there. And when that person would win that trip, everybody in the office was like, whoa.
I want to be there.
I want to be there.
Next year or whatever.
Yeah, so it created a competitiveness. And
excellent.
Now, what Greene, in an interview, I've seen him talk about envy, that we all have envy.
Mm-hmm.
But we should use that, and instead of saying being envious of the other person, use it to inspire us and like, wow, they deserve that trip. They worked really, really hard. If I work really, really hard, I can earn that trip too. Instead of being, let's say, envious of the person and they don't deserve that. They just barely got by, whatever the case. You have to like trick your brain. Greene talks about Ryan Holiday. He says, I'm envious of him because he's younger than me by 40 years or 30 years. He's got more books out than me. And he's extremely successful, family, this, that.
Yeah, but he was Greene's protege.
He was Greene's...
Because he worked for Greene.
He helped write the 48 Laws of Power.
Yeah.
However, Greene then says, but that's the wrong approach, to think like that. No, he deserves all those things. He's worked really, really hard. He's really, really smart. He deserves those things, and use that more as like inspiration to do better yourself instead of just envious of the other person. But it's human nature.
But you know how hard it is to do that? More power to Robert Greene for being, what's the word? The tremendous human being. Because the initial idea, or you get confronted.
Human nature.
Yeah, human nature. Oh man, this guy, he learned all kinds of stuff from me, and look what he's doing now, and he's doing better than me, or whatever. So, more power to Greene to be able to have that maturity, to look at it that way, which is the most effective way, I believe, to look at it. Because otherwise, where does the other path lead you to? Nowhere good.
Nowhere good.
Because that envy is going to poison you little by little.
Yeah.
And you reach a point where, of no return, where you might even hate the guy. So you have to be careful with that. But I think that's in the character of the human being, and you have to keep an eye on it, when you're leading people,
Yeah.
And you see it all the time, people fighting for accounts. How did this account get distributed here? And, people fight for accounts.
Yeah.
If it's a big account, a huge account, it's very... So...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to throw in? Decentralization was a big thing. Smaller teams are faster, more creative, more adaptable.
There was something that I wanted to tell you. He was talking about being a warrior in life.
Having more options is the goal. And Greene brought up Sun Tzu, how that's one of the things that Sun Tzu says in war, in strategy, you just want to have more options than the other person.
That's correct. There was one thing that I did want to say, that he says that Napoleon, one of the quotes from Napoleon was, separate to live and unite to fight. That was interesting to me. Okay?
Separate to live.
And unite to fight. He said that Napoleon, that was one of the quotes. But the last thing that I like to throw out there, which I think is really a very cool golden nugget provided by General Patton, he said, never tell people how to do things. Just tell them what it is that you want. Don't tell people how to do it. Just tell them what it is that you want. And he says, they are going to surprise you with their ingenuity. In other words, how they get there. So don't tell them how to do it. Tell them the goal that you want. And let them figure out how to get there. And he says, the ingenuity that people have, will surprise you many times. And supposedly Patton said that.
Yeah.
So don't tell people how to do it. Just tell them, I want this done. Please get it done. So that was interesting.
I like that because you're allowing the person to bring in their creativity, and you may know the old way of doing things. They might bring a better way of doing it.
Don't tell them how to do it. Just tell them what to do.
Right.
In other words, don't tell them how. But tell them about the goal you want. This is what I want, guys. Go out there and get it done.
Figure
and you
it out.
got 5 teams. Figure out how to do it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I like that because you're not putting your idea. Yeah, you're absorbing whatever it is new that may be coming up, and they may come up with something better than you ever thought.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, we need people to think for themselves and be creative. And if you're just taking orders and trying to follow to the T, it doesn't allow room for that.
Right.
So, in certain instances, like the Germans say, maybe that's needed.
Right.
Anything else you want to throw in?
No, that was it.
All right. I think that we'll wrap up chapter 6 to
We'll say
segment your
something.
forces.
We want to thank everybody for their comments. Our channel is growing. And I read something that said that 40 to 60% of the people that are viewing the channel do not subscribe. So we would ask you to subscribe, please. We're trying to get to 2,000 subscribers. Quick.
Yeah, we're almost there.
So if 40% of the people that listen don't do and are not subscribers subscribe, we'll get there, like quick. So if you can do that, that'd be great, and share it with friends and family.
Thank you.
Thank you.